Welcome to Meet the Candidates, the local election forum from Pioneer PBS. This season, we asked every candidate the same list of questions to learn more about what type of legislator they will be if elected. In this episode, we will meet candidates from Minnesota House District 15A. District lines have changed since the 2020 census. District 15A is made up of Lac-qui-Parle, Yellow Medicine, and Lyon counties. Major cities include Marshall, Granite Falls, Tracy, and Canby. To find out which district you live in, visit mnvotes.org. And now, let's meet the candidates. We will start with DFL candidate Keith VanOverbeke.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am Keith VanOverbeke from Marshall, Minnesota, and I am running for the District 15A House Representative seat that's up for election on November 8th. I was born in Tracy, Minnesota in 1953. I grew up on a farm north of Minneota, and I attended high school there. In 1971, after I graduated, I went to University of Minnesota at Morris, and I have a political science degree, which I ended up using in unintended ways as a railroad track maintenance worker for the Burlington Northern Santa Fe and a couple of other railroads. I worked for parts of 41 years to accumulate 30 years of service. So there was a lot of layoffs in the 80s and that. It was difficult, but meaningful, useful work. I met very many down-to-earth people, and I believe that we did our part to contribute to our area. The reason that I would want to run and become your representative is that I truly believe that the functions that are performed by government on our behalf are necessary and needed in our society. For too long, we've been led to believe that we can scapegoat everything onto politicians and the government, when actually we need an effective government that works for the interests of all of us. I'm a working class person. I understand what it is to have difficulties in life economically. I know that we need to make a system that works better for all of us. I had many layoffs over the years due to the fact that healthcare was expensive and my employer didn't want to pay the premiums. So with all this in mind, that is why I want to run. I believe I am one of the people and that I can represent you as one of the people. Thank you.
Why do you want to be the representative for your district?
I want to represent District 15A because I firmly believe that having been born in this district, lived in this district throughout my life, I understand the nature of this district and our basic needs. We need economic development. We need affordable, accessible health care. We need good education for our youngsters. We need a system of public works, highways, bridges, infrastructure. We need all these things, and government is the medium where these things are provided for our society. My hat on a railroad, this hat shows a locomotive on two parallel rails. The thing is, everything's become too partisan. We need to realize that we're tied together as a society. We need to work together. We need to find common ground. And we need to realize that the opposite party is not the enemy. The opposite party is our fellow citizens. So I want to make government work. I want to make the representation being more of all the people, not just some particular specialized interests or where money influences every decision, because money matters, but it matters to all of us. And we all need a way to climb up and improve our lives. And government can serve that purpose. I don't see the private sector doing it for us.
What are your priorities for the next legislative session?
The next session that we enter into in state government needs to actually get something done. Very little was accomplished in the last session. We need to quit pushing everything down to the end of the session in a huge omnibus bill. We need to quit making deals with each other and then reneging on those deals. For instance, our district heavily relies on agriculture for its economy. The state legislature last year managed at the tail end to finally get a bill in front of the governor that he was very willing to sign, but it was minuscule to what had been proposed and agreed to earlier. A little over $50 million of general fund money with some legacy money finally was put into a bill. And if you figure out that the original budget was in excess of $52 billion that was proposed, something like 0.15% of total budgetary money initially available was spent on agricultural interests. I realize that farms are getting bigger and there's greater investment. But having said that, for a district that's so heavily reliant on agriculture, for only this little amount of money to be spent so that all you can do with it is pay the salaries of the people that work for the ag department, you have purposely made the system fail by not providing the fuel that the engine needs.
What unique perspective do you bring to the Minnesota House?
The perspective that is unique to me is my background. I really am a blue-collar working person. I struggled and worked hard all my life. I traveled far and wide to keep a job. I didn't whine and complain. I went to work every day and did what I could to the best of my ability. So to take my hat off and be in government is going to be the same thing. I'm going to show up, I'm going to work hard to learn, and I'm going to be involved in hearings and in discussions with all the members that I meet, across the aisle too. There's lots of good ideas. There's lots of intelligent people. In fact, I know quite a few fellow Democratic candidates that are running in this area. Carrie and Fernando and Tom Custer and Anita for Marshall. And I know that there's enough ability in the legislature if we only have the will to work together in good faith. You know, we can discuss, we can disagree, but at times we will need to compromise and meet each other halfway to get the work of the people done. Government needs to function. It's not a frill. It's something that's essential to creating the infrastructure and to maintaining the system that we have to keep our state alive and make it more vibrant.
What is your vision for the future of Minnesota?
My vision for our state's future is to get us back on track and to get us to be maintaining what we do have and to be improving what we can improve over time by investing into our state in a timely manner. When we keep kicking the can down the road, things only become more costly. Things only become more dilapidated. We only fall further behind. We're in a competitive situation economically. We need an educated public. We need to have more options for our young people in community colleges, in various training for modern day economies. So there's a lot of things that the state government needs to be involved in. And we need to realize that by not doing so, we're falling further behind. We need to do more for our health care. We need to be able to keep people as they age in their homes better. We need to make health care more readily available to more people. We have to work together to try to keep costs in line, but also be able to provide for these needed public, education, health care. These are not optional things for human beings. These are things that can be done in a much better way if we just work across partisan aisles and if we just make up our minds together to utilize the best ideas that come forward. So that's my vision for Minnesota and my purposes for running for your state District 15A House of Representatives person. Thank you very much.
And now, a closing statement.
When I close this session today, I want people to realize the importance of this election. The primary reason that I am running is that we need competition of ideas. We need more than just one party. For too long, people in this area have felt obligated to vote for only one party. One party does not have the almighty in their hip pocket. One party does not have all the moral self-righteousness necessary to do everything right. People need to realize that we are in serious times. We need a state government where we have a situation where sanity prevails, where human rights prevail, where choice prevails. We have seen what's happened at the national level. It ought to concern all of us that our government is not functioning as a government of, for, and by the people. It needs to get back to that. We need to take our time that we live in and the situations that we are in seriously. We need to be less angry. We don't need hatred, animosity. We need cooperation. We could even use a little more kindness. But most of all, in our government, we need some real thoughtfulness and some real engagement. And you folks need a representative that's going to show up and participate and is going to vote for you. So in return, I'm asking you to vote for me and our fellow Democratic DFL candidates on November 8th, if not before. Thank you for your time very much.
You can find more information about Keith VanOverbeke by contacting your local DFL office. Next, the Republican candidate, Chris Swedzinski.
Hi, my name is Chris Swedzinski. It's an honor to represent you in House District 16A with redistricting. The districts have changed a bit, and so double check that your lines and where you live, and you may or may not be in that particular district anymore. The new district that I'm running in is House District 15A, and I farm with my wife Jessica in rural Ghent, and we raise corn and beans, and we've got 5 young kids. And it's just a great honor to serve the people of Southwest Minnesota at our state's capital. A lot of our goals and our focus has been over the years to focus on making sure that we have strong communities in rural Minnesota, good jobs, and strong families. And look forward to the conversation we have tonight. I want to thank all the folks from Pioneer Land for taking a bit of time out of your day to learn and to meet the candidates and just to get better informed about the elections process, and look forward to answering some questions tonight.
Why do you want to be the representative for your district?
You know, that's a really great question. You know, serving the legislature, you know, at times can be very difficult and stressful and frustrating at times. But at the end of the day, I really pray about whether or not I should have run again, and I thought to myself, why am I running for the state legislature again? And it's because I love this state. You know, we have, as I mentioned before, my wife and I have 5 kids, and we really want to just make sure that this state is the best state it can be. You know, being friendly to business, friendly to families, and friendly to the freedoms that we all enjoy. You know, I'm pro-Second Amendment. I'm pro-business, I'm pro-small town. And, you know, serving and having those voice at the Capitol, I'm a small business owner as well. And having agriculture and business as part of my life is really important, and making sure that we have those voices heard at our Capitol. And just folks understand what it's like to compete in rural Minnesota. A lot of folks say, well, why we don't compete with China? Well, we don't always compete with China or Philippines or wherever we get cheap things built. But we do compete with Watertown, South Dakota. We do compete with Brookings. We do compete with Sioux Falls to keep those young minds and young people and families living strong and growing here in Southwest Minnesota. And that's why I'm running. I just want to be a strong voice for our rural values at our state's capital.
What are your priorities for the next legislative session?
Well, we've got a lot of work to do. You know, I would really like to see one of the first things we do out of the gate is get rid of the tax on Social Security benefits. You know, we're one of just a few states that continue to tax our elderly, the folks receiving Social Security benefits in Minnesota. And I want to change that. I feel like we need to get people here. We have a shortage of workers, and folks that maybe retire, that maybe after retirement move to Arizona or Florida or other states where they don't tax benefits or retirement, to get them just to stay. And because they have such a wealth of knowledge that if we can keep people here, whether they might be help at the school or help a small business or just work a few days a week, having those people stay in Minnesota rather than go to some other state will benefit all of us, the young and the old. That's my first priority. And then just government regulation. I hear over and over and over again about businesses and families and small cities that have exceptional costs. Just a lot of the small cities that we deal with are having to upgrade sewer systems or upgrade water treatment plants because of rulemaking through MPCA or the DNR. And that costs people a lot of money. And so we want to get those things under control. And just the frustration I hear over and over again with Governor Walz and his California car mandates, where he's mandating that we follow the rules that are created by bureaucrats over 2,000 miles away and say that's good enough for us. Well, Minnesotans are better than that, and we can make our own decision and forge our own future. And I think we need to have strong leadership that doesn't just bow down to big extremists in California and folks that are going to stand up for Minnesota values and our rural way of life.
What unique perspective do you bring to the Minnesota House?
Well, you know, I think some of the unique things that we bring is I'm probably just one of a handful of farmers in the legislature. So, you know, agriculture and agribusiness is the strong backbone of our economy. You know, raising the food, raising the proteins that we need across, not only here in Southwest Minnesota, but across the globe. You know, and just maintaining those jobs and maintaining those industries and growing those perspectives and just help educating folks from the cities that maybe are a generation or two removed from the farm, really help engage those issues. So, you know, whether you're a member of Farm Bureau or Farm Union, we all play a part in that when it comes to agriculture. And having strong leadership at the legislative level in agriculture that make their living from agriculture, I think brings a strong hand to that when we have those conversations with others from parts of the state. You know, I travel quite a bit with my welding business that I have. And so just bringing those conversations that I have, the frustrations that people have, the issues that they're dealing with across the state, but also across the country, is important to bring to the Capitol. And just having that really unique perspective of business and farming and just, you know, our rural way of life, I think brings a strong aspect to the Capitol. And you know, I've always said if you can't have coffee with someone, you probably can't pass legislation. So always willing to maybe have a cup of coffee and a roll once in a while too with people. So thanks.
What is your vision for the future of Minnesota?
Wow, you know, that's a great question. You know, a vision of the state of Minnesota is really, you know, where we are, where we've been, and where we're going to go. And, you know, a lot of the issues that we have as a state, we have to be competitive. And my vision of the state is that we're going to be a competitive place for people to come and move. We've seen a great migration. We've seen probably the greatest migration of people in the last 100 years of people leaving places like California, leaving places where they're seeing their freedoms being stripped away and overeager and government growth. Really frustrating people. And so we've seen a lot of movement into Ohio or Idaho and Wyoming and South Dakota, where folks are moving and taking those jobs from a digital perspective where they can work remotely and planting their lives in a more calm setting that they don't have to work a 9 to 5 and drive an hour each way after work, but they can come and raise their families on a small piece of land, have a couple chickens. And, you know, those are the types of futures we need to do. So we need to invest in ways, so broadband and the rest, so that we can attract those young people, those young families with those unique businesses and skill sets so that they can live here in rural Minnesota. But also just being competitive. And, you know, they estimate that, let's say we move forward with this green revolution that we hear a lot about, the amount of copper that we're going to need, that we've mined in the last 500 years, if we're going to have this revolution, we're going to have to mine the same amount in the next 25. So we're going to have a state that's wise and smart, that we actually utilize the resources that God's given us whether that's copper, nickel mining in northern Minnesota, whether that's pushing the limits on animal agriculture and regular agriculture here in southwest Minnesota, all across the board. We see what's going on in Europe. They're having huge energy issues with their renewable programs that they've pushed forward. They've relied heavily on dictators in Russia, and we need to be self-sustaining. We need to develop our natural resources here in the United States, here in the state of Minnesota, so they're not reliant on foreign dictators across the globe. And so those are the futures that we want to leave, and just responsible spending as well. You know, we've got a state of Minnesota that spends a lot of money. And we have grown exponentially, way more than the family budget. You know, the state of Minnesota potentially can grow up to 10% every 2 years. And I don't think people's budgets grow that much. And so we need to get spending under control, be more family friendly, more business friendly, and keep our small rural communities vibrant by making the investments that we need.
And now, a closing statement.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for tuning in tonight. And we just appreciate all that you do in rural Minnesota, and the families you raise, and the grandchildren you have, and the kids you have. My goal as a state legislature is just to represent you well. And you know, we may not always agree, but I would just recommend that whether you're a Democrat or Republican or an independent, do the research, look at the candidates, and make the best decision. And I would ask for your vote. Thank you.
You can find more information online about Chris Swedzinski at his website, chrisswede.com. Learn more about voting, how to register, and what district you live in by visiting the Minnesota Secretary of State website at mnvotes.org. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Thank you for watching Meet the Candidates on Pioneer PBS.